So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back after lunch break. So we've got a really exciting presentation by Abby Copley. Abby is in her NQT teaching year and she currently teaches year 2 at Cornerstone, but has had lots of experience in the past before doing teaching with SEND children, working in lots of different providers. And this has allowed Abby to develop her passion for ensuring that all children can access the curriculum that they need, and has also along the way taught her the importance of using accessibility tools within her teaching. So she's going to talk to you today about the use of presentation apps and developing story through them. So I'll hand over to Abby. If you have any questions, then please post them into the little question speech bubble area, and I'll come back to you at the end and we can ask the questions of Abby later on. So take away, Abby.
Thank you very much, Tanya. So, like Tanya said, my name's Abby Copley. I'm an NQT teacher and I currently teach year 2, but I do have a background in working with special educational needs. I did that for 5 years before becoming a qualified teacher. So quite a few years. I did my training within the Cornerstone Academy Trust. So before we went into lockdown, I had about 2 years of experience of using all the IT tools. Within this session today, I'm going to outline the importance of storytelling on young minds and how in a digital world and the current situation we are faced with in schools trying to deliver a blended learning, students can still receive high quality stories. So the first thing we are going to look at is, why is story time important? Now, lots of different people have got lots of different views onto why it's important. I've picked out a few the things that I align myself with, things that I believe strongly in. So it assists cognitive development, and cognitive development refers to how we perceive and think about our world in reference to our intelligence, reasoning, language development and information processing. By reading to children, you are providing them with a deeper understanding about their world and are filling their brains with background knowledge. They then use this acquired background knowledge to make sense of what they see, hear and read, which aids in their own cognitive development. It also helps them develop empathy. When we read a book, we put ourselves in the story in front of us. This allows us to develop empathy as we experience the lives of other characters and can identify with how they are feeling. Children can then use this understanding to empathise in the real world with other people. Additionally, children will gain a greater understanding of emotions, which can help them understand their own emotions and those of others. This helps dramatically with their social development. It really helps them gain a deeper understanding. So a book can take us anywhere in the world, to another city, to a different country, or even to an alternative universe. By reading a book, a child learns about people, places, and events that they couldn't learn otherwise. This gives children a deeper understanding of the world around them and cultures that are different from their own. Another really good reason to read aloud to children is it gives them an example of fluent reading. So when children first learn to read, they aren't fluent and they're sounding out phonetically. They're sounding out letter by letter, sound by sound. And they pick up the process of fluency by, one, learning what different sounds are and how they blend together, but also they imitate when people read to them. So if you read a sentence to a child and you keep reading it and reading it, in the end, they imitate that and they pick up the same sentence and they can read it a lot more fluently. It also helps improve their literacy skills. So reading aloud with young children, even if they can't fully understand what you are saying, gives them the skill that they need when they begin to read themselves. It shows children that reading is something achieved by focusing from left to right, and that turning pages is essential for continuing. Reading to children in even the earliest months of their lives can help with language acquisition and stimulate the part of the brain that processes language. It also gives them a much more extensive vocabulary. Hearing words spoken aloud can expose children to a range of new vocabulary and phrases that they would not have heard otherwise. By reading to a child daily, they'll learn new words every single day. It also helps them achieve greater concentration. Regular and consistent reading can help to improve a child's concentration abilities. Furthermore, it will help a child learn to sit still and listen for long periods of time, which will benefit them all throughout their schooling. It also helps with creativity and imagination. Reading a book relies on us using our imagination for picturing characters, visualising their settings and environments, and discussing what's coming next. We might use our imaginations if we want to learn about new people, places, and events and times. In turn, this developed imagination leads to greater creativity as they write and form their own stories. Before lockdown began, we would have story time within the Cornerstone Academy Trust at the end of every school day for about 30 to 40 minutes. Now that we have moved to virtual schooling and again adapted to blended learning, we still continue with this process, and we finish every school day with 30 minutes of story time, no matter what year you are in. I'm going to quickly talk through how all the different key stages do their story times, because we all adapt it slightly to obviously meet the needs of our students. So in early years, they often read picture books and share their screens with the students so that they can follow on the story as it goes. I'll discuss in a few slides' time the different variations of how we share our screens and the different applications we use to do that. Reception often use an application called Polly, which I've done a picture of here, and they ask the students what story they would like at the end of the day, and they'll give them a choice of 2 or 3 stories, and students could go on and vote for the story they would like. This gives students a sense of ownership over what they're going to listen to, and also about the fairness of voting. When reading the stories, the adults often include questions and try to encourage the children to join in with bits of the stories they know. So if they're reading, they're going on a bear hunt, if they're going through the river or something, they'll get them to join in, so maybe unmute their microphones and join in. The teachers have let me know that the children are really, really good now knowing when to unmute their microphones and when they need to be muted again. Early years also do something called Picture News, and I really liked this idea. So it's a resource that they sign up for, and it gives them a picture of something that's been in the news that week. And they then discuss this with the children and ask them questions about what they can see in the picture, what they think it means. It comes with some statements as well and some activities that can be done afterwards. They often predict what they think might happen and draw similarities from things that they already know. So this one of an aeroplane, they might talk about how holidays now are restarting, and some of the children already know this information and others don't, but it's a really good way to get young children involved in news. In Key Stage 1, we read a short story, and we read it over multiple days. So we might read the same story for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And the aim of this is so the students really know the story. So the first day we read it, we're just looking at comprehension and them using their imagination to really enjoy the story. And then the other days we pick out certain things. So the next day we might look at adjectives if we're trying to include those in our writing, and we'll go through the book and we will highlight all the really good adjectives they've used and explore maybe the punctuation, the definitions of words, pick out words they're unfamiliar with, and maybe draw on words that are similar. So if we've got small, we might have tiny, and try and introduce and build up their vocabulary that way. Alongside short books, we also read a chapter book. So we read our story of the week story. We read that first. We'll do that for about 5-10 minutes. It's only a short story. We look at what we want to look at for that day, and then we move on to our chapter books. So we read a chapter book to extend their vocabulary, and will often be a book that they would not generally pick up to read themselves, but something that's still obviously appropriate for their age range. These chapter books sometimes can be short chapter books of only a few chapters, and other times we go for longer books that last us over multiple story times, and we can really make that story last and they can get a real sense of enjoyment out of it. Again, this really helps them pick up vocabulary they wouldn't use, stories they wouldn't usually read, but stories that they enjoy listening to. In Key Stage 2, they quite often read a Kindle book when we're doing virtual schooling, and like I've got in a picture of here, they share their screen so that children from home can follow on. They pause throughout to discuss the plot, the themes and quite often make predictions about what they think is going to happen next. Recently, they've been using their story time to make a conscious effort to read more diverse books, and they've recently read Kick and a book called Ghost Boys, which are both in response to the Black Lives Matter protests, and they have had a great vehicle for discussion in a safer space in the fictional world, which not always reality, so that they can discuss things a little bit more openly. Another thing that Year Sixes have been doing, which I think is a really good idea, is they have been exploring Anne Frank's diaries through vlogs. So the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam have recorded a series of Anne Frank's diaries, but made them into vlog styles. This makes it really accessible for young children who might find it a bit daunting to read through hours and hours of diary entries, where a vlog is much more in modern society. That's how each key stage does it. We're now going to talk about what applications we use to tell our stories and involve the children at home. So PowerPoint is probably the most universal for everyone, as it does not require a subscription, and most teachers will already have the Microsoft software of PowerPoint on their computers, or they can get it online. So for this one, this is how, if you were doing story time with me and I chose a PowerPoint, I'd have the picture of the story on my screen like this. I'd usually blow it up to full size, and I would read the story just like this now, sharing the pictures, and I just keep flicking through, just like as if I was doing it through a visualizer. This means that students can still see the visual of the story and read along if they wish, as well as hear it read to them. A tip for this that I have found useful is taking the photos of the book via an application called Office Lens. I have the app on my Surface, which is our laptops, and on my phone, as the quality of the photos are a lot better than just taking them on just a normal camera. In school, we also have a scheme called Accelerated Reader, and this really helps promote children to read. So at the beginning of the term, they do something called a Star Reader Quiz, and this gives us a current reading age of the child, and it sets a point score, so how many books they should read within that term. Students then read a book, that could be at home, they could have the book read to them, they could read it themselves at school, and then they go online, they go onto Accelerated Reader and they do a quiz. This quiz then is sometimes 5, 10, maybe 20 questions, and depending how many they get right, they get a certain amount of points to go towards their target. So the quiz is testing their comprehension. So it might be what happened at this part in the story, or as they get into a bit of the older years, it's more of the underlying, can you comprehend what the person was feeling when she meant this kind of thing. It's a really good way to motivate students to read as they aim to reach their targets. And we quite often have like competitions between the year groups. So before we shut down for lockdown, we had a little competition going on, and year 3 were winning. They'd read the most books, and then closely followed by year 2. And we'd go and see the year 6s and say, come on, year 6s, you need to pull your socks up, you need to read some more books. And it was a really good way to encourage lots of different year groups to read. Oxford Owl. So this is a website that we use, and it has lots of our phonics resources in. So the phonics we do in the early years and Key Stage 1. But it also has an online bookshelf of what I've put here. I'm just going to share with you a quick video of me navigating through the site to show you around.
So on Oxford Owl, you can search by age group, and it will bring up books relevant for that age group. There are also different series that you can read. So in school, we do a lot on Read, Write, Ink for the younger years. That's the phonics scheme we use, and some of those books are on here. Also by levels, so Oxford level, book bands for all different types. If I just show you a quick book, so once it opens the book, it's really visual, so I can share my screen with the students like I'm sharing my screen with you now and flip through it. makes it really visual. The children can see exactly what you're reading. And there's tools so that I can write on it, highlight words. So it might be that I pick out a word like the word empty and I highlight that to the children and we can discuss it that way. I can zoom in, I can zoom out, but I just think it's a really, really good way to show the children what they're reading. They can follow it along at home, makes it really visual for them and a lot more enjoyable.
What I will quickly say on Oxford Owl as well is the students have their own login, so they can log in from home, and although they can't get physical books out of a library at the moment, they can log into Oxford Owl, and a bit like I just read the book there, they can do exactly that from home. So it's another really good way to get them to engage with stories. What I'm going to talk about next is something called Storytime Online. So this is a free website that uses actors and other famous people, and they read a story aloud, and it also has animations in the background. I have to say the students, especially those of Key Stage 1, absolutely love these videos. They beg me every time I do a story time to share a new My Storytime Online. The website has a large variety of different books to listen to, and you can also go onto YouTube and they have loads more that obviously used to be on there but they've taken off, but they're still really good. Again, it's another way for students to enjoy a story both through audio and visually, and I'm going to show you a quick example. We won't watch this whole clip, but here's an example of a bit of story time. Oh, sorry, bear with me.
Welcome to Storyline Online, brought to you by the SAG-AFTRA Foundation. I am Chris O'Dowd, and today I'm going to read Arnie the Donut, written and illustrated by Laurie Keller. Arnie turned out to be just the kind of donut he'd hoped he'd be. Chocolate covered with bright coloured candy sprinkles.
Look at all my sprinkles. There must be a million of them.
Actually, there were only 135, but I'm not going to spoil it for him.
He was made very early in the morning at the downtown bakery, home of the best donuts around.
Around, get it?
So obviously I won't play anymore, but they have different voices, it has the different animations, and at the end the actor often speaks about why they like the story, so usually a good moral comes out of the story. Another website we use is this online library called Myon. You have to sign up for this service, and it's very similar to Oxford Owl in the sense it has a really large selection of different books that feature on there. What's a really good thing about Myon is it has the audiobooks on there as well, so they can speak the words for you. So for children with dyslexia, or for someone who's really struggling to just pronounce one word, you can click on it and it will speak it to you. It can speak the whole book to you if you'd like. The only downside I'd say is it's quite a monotonous tone. It doesn't have any emphasis, doesn't use it just sounds really mechanical. It doesn't add any excitement to the story. So I definitely encourage the children to either read it themselves or I would read it for them. So then I can include the expression and the tone of voice. Again, you can open up the book like Oxford Owl and share your screen to the students so they can see the pictures and follow along. Quite similarly for the Kindle app, you can download this on most devices. You have to pay for the books, that's the only problem. But I know in Key Stage 2, they use this a lot more often than some of the other apps that I've just spoken about. It's a really good tool that it has a similar thing to Myon. You can click on words and it'll pronounce them for you. You can highlight words and it will bring you up its meaning. So I don't know, if you were reading a book with Key Stage 2 and one of them raised their hand and said, I'm not sure what that word means, miss, you can highlight it and it'll bring them up a definition and a list of other words, or the list of synonyms, so other words that mean the same thing, which is really good. And I think for children who struggle with wanting to know what words means, and it also extends their vocabulary as well. Purple Mash is an application we use frequently across the trust, and we use it for lots of different lessons, not just for stories. The story purpose has many functions, so not just for sharing stories, but I've got a picture here of, in Year 2, we do the Great Fire of London as one of our projects, and there's lots of different writing templates for them. So this one is them write their own story about the Great Fire of London, and it's got the key words down the side and some key pictures that they might want to include. It also has a feature in Purple Mash called Serial Mash, which looks like this. So this is a series of chapter books, and at the end of each chapter within the book, there is a range of related activities that the teacher can assign to the children. These activities can range from simply colouring in a picture in the early years to ordering the events of the story in the older years. Children really engage well with these activities, and again, it's really helpful for comprehension, to ensure comprehension has occurred. There have been a couple of different talks over the last couple of days about Purple Mash, so if you want to know a bit more about it, then send us a message and we can try and find the videos recordings for you. I don't know loads about it, I only know the Serial Mash side of it and finding different templates, but we've had some people in from Purple Mash to give us a talk, so if that's something that interests you, then just let us know. This quote here: "We are creatures of stories. We are the stories we tell and the stories we are told." I am very passionate about stories. I think they really help develop a person as to who they are. And I think we learn a lot about ourselves through stories. So I really like this quote and think it's really, really relatable. Flipgrid. So within a school before lockdown, we had things called bookworms. So students would read a book, they would then go and speak to the librarian and retell the story in their own words. The librarian would then ask them a few comprehension questions to ensure that they've actually read the book and really taken in what they've read. If the librarian was then satisfied with what they'd said, they would award them a bookworm. And if you got so many bookworms, you get a certificate. So if you do 10 bookworms, 25 and 50, you get a certificate and you get a little gift as well. In the younger years, this is very, very popular. So throughout virtual schooling, we decided to keep this going. So the librarian recorded a Flipgrid saying to the students, she's missing everyone, the library's deserted, can they read her some books and retell the story in their own words? And she's still been awarding bookworms, and then in our whole school assemblies, which we have every Friday, those certificates have been presented virtually to the people who have received them, and they've been going down really, really well. Again, it's another way of keeping children motivated to read. So how you can link storytelling to the curriculum, because obviously not every school does story time at the end of the day, and they might not have time to try and fit half an hour in, but even 10-15 minutes of you reading a good quality story to the class can really help them. But other ways that we use stories within the curriculum, the most common one is obviously in English. We do lots of different projects in Year 2 where we start it through telling a story. We do one on traditional tales, and me and the other teachers, we act out bits of the story. So we acted out the Three Little Bears. We also do a project on Greek myths, and Greek myths it's quite complicated, some of the names. So we'd assign ourselves a character. So I was Prometheus this year, and we acted out different myths, and the students then knew, oh, Miss Copley was Prometheus, Miss Shooter was Epimetheus, because the names are very similar, and it really helps the students engage into it. So they could be quite boring if you don't do that, but students really love that. And you can still do that online. So you can either get together, if you can get to school with your colleagues, you could get together and you could just act it out and film it. If not, you could all log on and deliver it virtually like this, maybe dress as your character and then chip in when it's your turn to speak with your lines. I've recently done something called a teacher in role with my students. So I dressed up as a character and they had to ask questions to work out who I was. They weren't allowed to guess who I was straight away. My outfit actually does give it away this time, but sometimes do it a lot more complicated than that. But they have to ask questions to figure out who I was. And I've got a little video for you of me delivering this to my children.
Now I have done a bit of an introduction about myself, you can ask some questions to find out who I am. Remember, you're not allowed to guess my name, you're only allowed to ask questions to try and figure out who I am. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask to try and work out who I am? Jack, I can see your hands up. What's your question for me?
What characters are in your story?
In my story, there is a big bad wolf, there is a grandma, and there's a woodcutter. They are some of the characters in my story. Seb, what's your question?
Do you have a favourite item of clothing?
Oh, well, my favourite item of clothing that I like to wear, Seb, is this nice red cape. So I wear it and I wear the hood up to protect myself. Any other questions? Let's have a look. Willow, I can see your hand up.
Where are you going on your journey?
I am going to my grandmother's house.
Right, we'll stop that there because it goes on for quite a while. But I dressed up, I left the classroom, and the children then asked me questions to try and work out my story and figure out who I was. I did something similar in RE recently. We watched a video of a religious story about Sikhism, and then I got the children to film their own retelling of the story, so to put the story in their own words and then send me their videos. So another way of just them using IT to something we usually do in class, we usually do a bit of drama role play, and they can continue that from home. So instead of having to write out and retell me the story, they could act it out, they could just speak it out if they wanted to. It's all about them using their imagination, and it's a really good way to check they've comprehended the story. That's all I've got for today. Do any of you have any questions you'd like to ask?
So hi Abby, thank you for that. So you mentioned earlier that in Key Stage 1 you repeat a book for multiple days, so you read one book over a sequence of days and you look at the different aspects of the book on each day. So wondering how the children found this, and do they maybe sometimes find this a little bit monotonous, or are they quite enthused by listening to that repetitive story over and over?
I would say this really depends on the book that you choose, and it's a lot of beginning trial and error. We have got it now at a really good balance, and the children really enjoy it. And if ever there's a day that you forget to pick up the story first, their thing is, we need to read the story of the week. We really need to read the story of the week. So they don't find it monotonous at all. They really enjoy looking for those things, and they start to use them within their writing. So 1 week we picked up similes, and there was a really good simile in the book, and the next day in their writing they were all really eager to include similes in their story. So I would say it's definitely really benefited them, their comprehension, picking out key bits of the story, and I wouldn't say they find it monotonous at all. Thank you for that question though.
Okay, I think we're probably just about at the right time to finish. So I'd just like to say thank you all for listening, and thanks to Abby, and have a lovely rest of the afternoon, and we'll send out the links to this video so you can watch them again at a later date. So thanks everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.